the South Asian Gallery, and we're looking at the Palampore, which is an Indian textile originally made for European export, and it is a bed curtain. At some point it was probably cut, and you can see the arch at the top to fit into an architectural space. Luckily they saved the two parts and we still have them. This textile is very large, as you can see, and so that brings many challenges to treating it. And one of them is the space, and we didn't have adequate space in the Textile Conservation lab. So it involved doing some renovations in the lab before we could even start treating it, because we needed to be able to lay it out. So this textile suffers from some of the typical things that we see with cotton. It's a cotton textile. It has some overall yellowing, and there were stains, which you can see particularly in the lower right corner. But the worst thing of this textile, or the worst damage, were these patches that were on the back. And they were in a number of areas. There were 12 altogether. They were adhered with starch paste. And they were really heavy. They were very heavy cotton. And this heavy cotton was causing stress to the textile because it's basically gluing that area of the textile. And normally, as you know, with textiles or fabric, they move. The yarns need to move. And so when this patch is glued on the back, it really holds that area in place, and it caused stress around the perimeter of the patch. And so there were actually areas on the Palampore that had tears happening around these patches. So we decided that they had to come off. And so that involved some testing, and we found that humidification released the patches, but the starch paste left a residue on the back. And that is something that we could get off the bulk of, but a lot of the starch paste still remains in the fibers. And we can't take that out, because in order to get that out, you need to use enzymes and a water treatment. And this textile has gilding on it, gold, sprinkled all over the surface, which was released with water. So we couldn't use a wet treatment. So we used humidification, and we used mechanical action to basically scrape off the starch paste as much as we could. It left the edges kind of crumpled up and rolled and seemingly very brittle. So it involved some more treatment after that, once we got the bulk of the paste off, to humidify and flatten those areas. Then we had to work with the stained areas, and I did find that using suction with some water, just flushing it through, I know I said earlier we couldn't use a water treatment, but with suction it basically pulls the water down, and if there's gilding in that area, it would loosen it, but it would reform, the adhesive would reform, and once the water was released from the area, the gilding was still basically adhered to the textile, so we could do that kind of a wet treatment. We had to do some patching to those areas that we took the old patches off, but we wanted to use a lighter weight cotton so that we would avoid the problem that happened before, and we didn't want to glue them on again to avoid the problem of fixing the fibers or yarns in one position. So we wanted to have more flexibility. So I chose to do a stitched on repair, or instead of an adhesive repair. And we needed to dye some fabric, and so that took a while to get the right color, because as you can see where there's the loss, we needed to find a very good match for that area. Otherwise it would disrupt the experience of the viewer to see a color that didn't quite work in that space. So that upper third of the textile is now backed with this cotton fabric, and it is stitched on in very broad stitches, and then there's a lot of very fine stitches right around the tear. Because it's such an involved treatment, it took 8 months to complete. The viewer does not see the problems that are actually still there. So, you know, this treatment was very successful in preserving the textile, but also contributing to the aesthetics of it. So it was a good treatment.